Hey everybody, and welcome to Inside Quest. We are the healthy habit loop for your mind. Our goal is to bring on amazing people who can get you hooked on leveling up your brain. And if you're looking for a trigger to habituate your intellectual expansion, there is no better guest than the man joining us today. His life's work sits at the intersection of psychology, technology, and business. And with his background, it's no wonder that he has so seamlessly integrated seemingly disparate disciplines into a powerful, multi-dimensional whole. An immigrant with a self-proclaimed crazy name, this visionary thinker translated an early feeling of being different into true entrepreneurial success. While he now holds a degree from the Stanford Graduate School of Business, this wonderkin built and successfully sold his first company before getting said degree. Since then, he has founded and sold yet another company, launched a successful blog, penned a best-selling book, and taught at two different schools within Stanford University. A prolific content creator, he not only publishes powerful articles on a wide range of topics to his own site, he is also an active contributor to Forbes, TechCrunch, Inc., and Psychology Today. A techno-prophet who transcends being a mere pundit by betting on his own prognostications, he's an active investor that applies his capital to companies he believes are creating the best positive habit-forming technologies. His past investments include Product Hunt, Pantry, and HubLogix, just to name a few. Please help me in welcoming the man the MIT Technology Review dubbed the prophet of habit-forming tech, the author of Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Technology, Nir Eyal.
Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Wow, that was an amazing introduction. I really want to meet that guy.
He's coming on the show today.
Hey,
you'll be very excited. Yeah.
Thank you.
Looking at your sort of self-described intersection of those three things, I'm really interested in psychology, and that was for me the beginning of my business world adventure as well. Was all about psychology. What was it that drew you to psychology?
Yeah, so there's a saying that you teach what you most need to learn.
That's good. I like that. I've never heard that before.
So that was definitely my case. I've always found it fascinating how products can change our behaviors. In particular, when I was a kid, I was obese. I was clinically obese. I went to fat camp, the whole 9 yards. And I still struggle with that. I mean, that's something that I still have to watch every day. But I think that's kind of started this early fascination of, wait a minute, these products and services that we use, sometimes we're in control of them and sometimes we're not. And that always interested me. And then my last company was at the intersection of gaming and advertising. And let's be frank here. Gaming and advertising are two industries that are dependent on mind control, right? I mean, advertisers don't spend all that money for their health. And gaming companies know exactly how to get you to progress and stay engaged with their games. And so I learned a lot of these techniques that then I share in my book, Hooked, around how these companies change user behavior. Now, the hope is that we can use these same techniques in all sorts of industries. And so that's kind of how I got into this interest in psychology, was from a personal interest, followed my curiosity, worked in the industry for many years. And then after that company was acquired, I had some time to dive deeper and really kind of make the work and answer the questions that I was interested in.
Yeah, I love that. Reading your articles, which there are many, and by the way, they're amazing and super diverse, which was something that I think is really difficult. You've penned this book, Hooked. Obviously, people invite you out to lecture on that. So I was thinking that a lot more of your stuff, because obviously you definitely pay homage to all that stuff that you've learned, but I expected that to really just dominate. And the fact that you're able to talk about so many different things is really fascinating, and I really, really encourage people to check out your website, nirinfar.com, Nir spelled N-I-R, very clever, by the way, and help me know exactly how to pronounce your name. But so that really, really interesting stuff on there, and you talk about that notion, right? I'm pursuing the questions that I want to answer in my own life. So if I can, I want to rewind back to, so you're a kid, you're struggling with your weight. That's something near and dear to my heart. I also grew up a little bit chubby. My family was obese, like literally almost my entire family, aunts, uncles, cousins, everything, the whole nine. So it was really, really prevalent in my family, so it was always top of mind for me. And I actually came to a similar answer, which is psychology. But how old are you when this starts formulating in your mind? When do you start taking control of things? What are some of the initial wins that started to give you that control?
I think it started from an understanding, right? I remember a buddy of mine who also struggled with his weight, and I think I was like 12 years old, and I was big up until kind of high school years. But he had this book called The T Factor. I still remember this little like pamphlet thing, and this idea of it actually told you the caloric content of different food. That was a new concept to me. At 12 years old, I didn't know. I just ate whatever I wanted. So just getting educated about how these things work was very empowering. And then I started also seeing that that there's this hidden truth behind the television commercials I was watching as a child, and realizing, wait a minute, what the advertiser wants me to do may or may not be in my best interests.
When do you start putting your finger on that? At what age?
I think pretty, but I think it's not necessarily unique. I think many of us, when we start realizing what's happening behind the curtain, we realize that there's other incentives happening there, and I think that when you reach that age of puberty and you exit this stage of pure innocence, and you realize that people have interests, people have incentives, and that companies lead that charge. Not that it's all bad, right? I mean, a lot of what I write about is about how to help people build habits using these technologies. So obviously, I'm a big proponent of habit-forming products and technologies. But what I'm even a bigger proponent of is understanding how these things change our behavior. That's really what fascinates me, so that we can do something about it, right? So that we can understand how these things change our behavior.
What is a behavior that you're trying to change right now?
I, in fact, struggle with my technology all the time. All right, I have a wife and I have a little girl, and I find that many times I'm preoccupied with checking my device as opposed to being fully present, and it drives me nuts because I know how these products work. So even I have to bring awareness back to how do I put these technologies in its place? So, for example, Freedom. I mean, this one app, Freedom. I don't know. Have you used this?
The one that stops your internet usage?
Exactly. It's a very, very simple technology. All it does is that when you want some headspace, when you need time to concentrate, and the kind of work I do, writing these blog posts and writing my book, I could not have gotten done without an app like this, because it's very simple. All you do is you hit this button, you say, I want a session of freedom for a set period of time. And then it turns off your internet. And you say, okay, well, I could just turn off my internet too. What's the big deal? Here's the thing. You can't turn the internet back on within that set period of time unless you reboot your whole machine. So they've added this extra work, this extra effort to keep you on task, right? It's a pre-commitment device. I want to support that movement, and I want to support these technologies that are helping to alleviate some of the bads that came with many of these goods.
So I love your concept of the growing awareness, and once you have awareness, and you're going to be able to attack things more effectively, and it's whether that's installing Freedom or changing your password and giving it to a friend or whatever the case may be. I love in your work the theme of human nature, and there's some really interesting stuff that you talk about. So hooks work because they prey on human nature, right? Just sort of universal operating system things that we all humans have. The hooks take advantage of that, right? The triggers, and you're very eloquent about that. You explained it a lot, and I recommend that you guys go watch his videos on that. He's got tons of videos that very, very clearly explain the hook cycle. But what is it? What are some key things about human nature these guys may not be aware that they're doing that would allow them to take back some control? Yeah.
Well, so these hooks have these 4 basic steps. And so we see in all sorts of habit-forming products, both online and offline, we see these 4 basic steps of a trigger, an action, a reward, and an investment. And it's the same design pattern that we go through time and time again that changes our preferences, that creates our tastes, and forms these habits. Right. These triggers, these actions, rewards, and investments. So when you think about the products that are most engaging, that capture our attention, that hold on to our focus and won't let go, you'll find these hooks if you dig below the surface. One of the things that I think kind of surprises people, or that they recognize in themselves, is the power of these rewards. If you think about a slot machine, what makes a slot machine habit-forming, or if not all-out addictive, is the fact that when you pull on a slot machine, there's this variable reward, right? What might I win? That's the variability. And we see the exact same psychology at work in all sorts of products. For example, with many things online, have you noticed that over the past few years, everything has a feed, right? There's this feed element in all sorts of products. Why is that? That didn't used to exist a few years ago, and yet today, everything has a feed. Well, if you think about it, what makes us scroll on a feed is the same exact psychology. It's scrolling and searching for that next reward, that next interesting bit of content is the exact same psychology that keeps us pulling on a slot machine. It's this search for a reward. Maybe the first thing's not that interesting, maybe the second's not that interesting, oh, but maybe the third thing is interesting. And to find more, all I got to do is keep swiping and swiping and swiping. So
have you read about the impact of the near miss in playing slot machines? Talk about that. That to me is the most fascinating part of the whole gambling industry.
Right. So there's this interesting phenomenon that the closer you are to realizing you almost got rewarded, the more likely you are to keep playing. So that's called the near miss effect. That they found that folks who, if you blatantly lost, you had a certain level of motivation to play again. If you blatantly won, you had a certain level of motivation to play again. But if you were in the middle and you're like, oh, I almost got it, I got 2 cherries and 1 bar, I almost got it, then you were the most likely to want to play again because you were close. And so we see this similar effect online, of course, and offline, frankly. It's not that habit-forming products are new or just confined to digital products. I mean, look, what makes spectator sports so interesting to watch? It's constantly near misses. Oh, my team almost got the goal. We almost got it, right? And there's this constant game of watching this little ball go back and forth across a field or across a court that is full of variability. That's what keeps us engaged.
Right. It's really fascinating to me. So one of the reasons I wanted him to talk about that, the concept of the near miss, is a universal human behavior. It's this thing that we have deep somewhere in the operating system, right? And it triggers so much behavior in people, behavior that I think that they're completely blind to. And it's, to me, like my life's journey has been about collecting those pieces of information so that I can hack myself, right? And you write very, very well about mind control, hacking yourself. I mean, just really, really great stuff. And I encourage you guys to go through the list of articles that he has. Look, some of the titles I promise you are going to pop out at you. It's going to seem like they were written for you. The one that you wrote about your dad and how you got him to lose weight obviously spoke very, very much to me. But the concept of collecting these things that the hook pattern uses against you, that's the real juice of your work, is because that stuff now you can use, you can flip it. So take, for instance, let's say I was prepping today, right? Perfect. Anytime you have to prep, right, there's a certain amount of effort, pain that goes into it. And oh God, the beauty of a distraction, right? Tweet comes in and the variable reward. Is it somebody saying that I'm brilliant or a total asshole? Hey, let's click and find out, right? So you get to, like, you want those. So in knowing that that's what's happening to me, and knowing that, and you talking about the hunt and the tribe, and all, which is very important, we'll have to get into. Yeah. Knowing sort of what these things are that are playing in my mind allows me to use that very feeling as a trigger and force a direction change in my behavior. Now, this is where it starts to chain and get fucking weird if people haven't already read your stuff. Okay. So you're going to have to bring it all back together for us here. But as that chain begins to occur and people are falling in, you've got that brilliant quadrant, right? Is this something that's an amateur? Is it a skillful? Is it a habitual act, or is it pure addiction, right? And where they are is going to depend what the thing is that's going to pop them out of it. He's going to walk you through all this. Don't panic if you don't know where we're going yet. He's got this on lock, all right? But so matching that trigger with how you treat that behavior. And I thought that was so brilliant, right? Because how many times, you've got that great analogy, how many times do you go to eat the bowl of cereal with a fork? Never, because you know that the bowl of cereal is meant to be eaten with a spoon. So help them understand, right? Walk them through that principal behavior of going, okay, and you can use my example maybe because I would love to just really understand it myself. Sure. The tweet comes in, I know that I'm craving, I know that what's happened is it's not created joy in me yet, because it could end badly, right? But it's created this itch,
right?
And now I want to scratch it,
right?
But I can flip that by understanding where I fall in that quadrant. So if you can walk them through what the quadrant is and how to effectively do it, it'd be amazing.
First of all, you've gone really deep into my stuff, which is awesome. I totally appreciate that.
For sure, your stuff is worth it.
But these people are thinking you're crazy right now because you just talked about eating cereal with a fork and this quadrant and that quadrant. So there's a lot of content here, a lot to digest. One of the core parts of the hook model is this concept of triggers. That a trigger is a cue to action. It tells us what to do next. Yep. And there are two types of triggers. There are external triggers and there are internal triggers. Now, external triggers we've all seen in our day-to-day lives. These are things like, a buy now button, or play this, or a friend telling you through word of mouth about something you should check out. External triggers. The information for what to do is in the trigger itself. Great. That's all obvious to us. We see these triggers every day, but what we don't think about enough, and what product makers covet the most, is creating an association with what's called an internal trigger. An internal trigger cues us to action. It tells us what to do next, but the information for what do we do is not in the trigger itself, as is the case of the external trigger. The information for what do I do next is given to the user from their own memory, through an association in their brain. So for example, when I'm in a certain place, a certain situation, a certain routine, around certain people, and most frequently when we experience a certain emotion, that prompts me to action. That tells me what to do next. And what's interesting is that the research shows us that it's not just any emotion. That we are prompted to do habitual behaviors most frequently from negative emotions. So what we do when we're feeling bored or lonesome or indecisive or lost or fatigued, what we do when we feel these negative emotions prompts us to act with little or no conscious thought. Why? Because this brain that we all have is a pattern matching device. That's what this thing is great at. Figuring out, hey, what solves my problems reliably, time and time and time again. And once I figure out cause and effect of where I can scratch my itch, where I can solve my pain, that's what I'm going to go to time and time again. So the ultimate goal of a habit-forming product is to no longer need those external triggers, the advertising or the spammy messages, right? That's how they start to create these associations. The ultimate goal is that we use our technologies, we use these products on our own, right? Facebook is not running television commercials, right? Why? Because their ultimate goal is to connect to an internal trigger, to create this association so that when you're feeling lonely or bored, you're checking Facebook with little or no conscious thought, right? That company would go out of business if they had to spend money on advertising to bring you back.
Right.
Their business model wouldn't work. They have to form habits or they're dead.
All right, so now the bad news for you is understanding as much of your work as I do, I want to start connecting some of these dots. Because my promise to these guys is I'm going to give you useful information, right? I'm going to bring these amazing people on who've got all these incredible insights. And then hopefully we can push a layer deeper than maybe they would anywhere else. So you break the world down into, God, were they motivators? There's the tribe, the hunt, and the self, right? Right. Is that what they were?
So those are variable rewards. Those are three types of variable rewards.
All right. So what in sort of revisiting my own world, my own internal state through your lens, what I do, so I have gotten very good at one skill, and that skill is I can force myself to feel positively about just about anything. So I see that Twitter thing come up, ooh, variable reward, what could this be? But I'm going to, at that moment, force myself to feel pride over being the guy that doesn't do that. Because I'm going to get my reward, right? But I've just forced myself to choose a different reward. And one of the things you talk about in the variable rewards is the hunt. And in the hunt, you talk a lot about the innate desire that humans have to dominate things. And you talk about email. Now, email is something everybody here already knows my thoughts on email, and your thoughts are fascinating. I will give a brief summary, and obviously if you want to expand, that it's the most addictive of the technologies, right? It's the one that just really plays into your desire to see what's going on, to connect with the tribe, to be important, to dominate it and get it done. And I cleared my inbox, man. I have nothing left, right? And that was the example you used of domination. And I was like, that is such a rad definition of domination to like go in and have whooped your email box's ass. Like I get it in the modern day world how that really does feel good. It unfortunately is a very leaky bucket because it will just immediately fill back up. But taking that desire to feel dominant over whatever task and leveraging it to create a new internal state, is that something that you've studied? Is that something that is a very common technique that people use to sort of convert that into something more productive?
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with you. I think that email is probably the mother of habit-forming technology. It's incredibly habit-forming, if not all-out addictive for a lot of folks. And here's why. I mean, it has a perfect hook. It has this trigger of when I'm bored, I check email, right? When I'm seeking connection, I check email. When I'm uncertain, I check email. It caters to a lot of internal triggers. A lot of anxiety can be fixed by doing something, by feeling productive, or quote unquote productive by using email. The action is very simple. The action phase of the hook is the simplest thing done to get a reward. Well, what do I have to do to get a reward from email? Boop, just open the app. Now I'm getting these rewards. Now it comes to the variable reward phase of the hook. I do an action and I get this immediate reward, and of course it's variable. I'm never quite sure what I'm going to find. And it comes in 3 types. We have the rewards of the tribe, rewards of the hunt, and rewards of the self. Rewards of the tribe are things that feel good and come from other people. Competition, cooperation, partnerships, empathetic joy. If I can make you feel good, it makes me feel good. All of these things feel good, have an element of variability, and come from other people. So on email, of course, email involves people we know. It has this social reward. Like you said, if I open an email, is it going to be somebody telling me good news or bad news, right? There's variability, there's uncertainty, and the only way I can scratch that itch is to open and read. Then rewards of the hunt. Rewards of the hunt are all about the search for material rewards. It stems from our primal search to, food, shelter, clothing, these material type of benefits. And of course, in modern society, these things are purchased with money. So when we talked about the gambling example, that's an example of reward of the hunt, right? This search for material rewards. Well, it turns out that material rewards can also take the form of information rewards. And of course, email is chock full of that information reward. And then finally is rewards of the self. Now, rewards of the self are interesting because there are things that feel good, that have this element of variability, but they don't involve other people, and they aren't about this material or information rewards. These are things that feel good in and of themselves. They're what's called intrinsically pleasurable. It's the search for mastery, the search for competency, the search for completion, and the search for control. The fourth step, so trigger, action, reward, and investment. The investment phase of the hook is where we put something into the product for a future benefit. So for example, in the case of email, when I send someone a message on one of these services, what do I get? What's my immediate reward? Nothing, actually, right? There's no points, there's no badges, there's no leaderboards. Nothing happens when I send someone a message. What I'm doing by investing in that platform is that I'm loading the next trigger because I will likely get a reply. And that reply comes coupled with an external trigger, right? A little notification that brings me back through the hook once again. So that investment of sending someone a message prompts the reply, which comes back in the form of an external trigger, prompting me to use the hook once again. So that's the 4 basic steps. It gives us a way that if you're a product maker, if you have dreams of touching the lives of hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of people with a healthy habit, well, you can engineer your product to build these healthy habits using these 4 steps of the hook.
There are people try and actually they create a new habit, right? So they get out of the traditional rut, whatever, but they ultimately then slide backwards. You had a guest post on your site about this. I thought it was fascinating. Walk them through why people have recidivism once they've started a new habit already.
So I think the first step, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier, is to figure out what type of behavior you're trying to change. That there's really 4 types of behavior change, behaviors to change,
right.
And then therefore there are 4 types of methods to change those behaviors. And the taxonomy is pretty simple, actually. So if you think about an axis, right? So on one axis you have if it's a doing behavior versus a don't do behavior. So something that you want to make automatic versus something you want to stop doing automatically. And then on the other axis you have whether it's a low willpower behavior or a high willpower behavior. And so what you'll get are these 4 quadrants, right? You'll get certain behaviors that are do low willpower, and then do high willpower, and then don't do low willpower, and then don't do high willpower. And it turns out that each of these 4 types. And if you go on my website, there's a lot more to explain around this. It's called the Behavior Change Matrix. These 4 behavior types need 4 radically different methods to change those behaviors. So, for example, that first quadrant of behaviors that are doing behaviors that are low willpower, meaning they're not very hard to do behaviors, those are called amateur behaviors. When I help these companies form habit-forming products, we're only talking about that bucket of behaviors that are doing behaviors that are relatively easy to do. They don't require much willpower. Opening Facebook, checking Twitter, going onto YouTube. These are not high willpower behaviors, right? Facebook did not have to tell us and implore us and teach us how to use their product. We just started using these products. So those are amateur behaviors. And so for some habits, that's the right method to go. It's about baby steps. It's around, small improvements. It's using what I call a MIA. A MIA is a minimum enjoyable action. So one of the ways I got in shape, and now I actually love running. I used to hate running. I used to dread it. Was by following my MIA, which is a minimum enjoyable action. So that's all in that quadrant of an amateur behavior. Doing these small things, getting better at that behavior until it becomes effortless, and that's how you progress. That's how you form that habit. And every time you say to yourself, "Oh, this sucks and this is painful and I don't like it," guess what? Don't do it.
Right.
Go back to your MIA. So this is how I learned this habit of running, which I love. And literally, I would jog for 10 seconds, and then I'd be out of breath, and I'd say, okay, that sucked. I don't like that anymore. I would go back to my MIA.
But how'd you convince yourself to do those first 10 seconds of running?
Curiosity, following my curiosity.
Okay.
Just, I wonder if I could do it. And I could do it for 10 seconds.
But walk me through what's going on in your head. So, because as somebody who uses fitness as a way to attack my mind, as you're going, what are you telling yourself? What's the narrative that you've got running that allows that to be enjoyable?
Is this MIA? Is this a minimum enjoyable
That's
action?
what you're saying as you're running?
Right.
Or have you...
Well, that's what I'm saying when it hurts.
Okay,
Because,
so just you allow yourself to back off.
I give myself the permission to enjoy the activity. Newsflash. Like, exercise should be for fun. Now, if you wanted to become an expert at something, if you wanted to do a behavior that requires a lot of willpower, baby steps and MIA ain't going to cut it. If you want to become an expert coder, or you want to become a professional bodybuilder, or an amazing musician, MIA is not the right strategy. Right? There you need diligent practice. You need, this 10,000 hour rule of figuring out your mistakes, and you typically need a coach to help you along. You do have to power through these difficult steps in the process and go back to and learn to enjoy the process of dissecting what you got wrong.
But don't you think the people that do that really pull that off? Because that's where I live my life, right? So, and we'll get back to your rules that you set for yourself, which I'm not letting you out of that one that easily, so we'll be coming back to that in a minute.
Okay.
But so they decide that that's where they fall. They want to become truly a master of something, and they're going to have to, it's grit, perseverance, I think is what you said you need to hold through, and that certainly rings true with what I know about humanity. So, at least for me, what I'm doing is attaching a sense of what I call framework happiness to it. So obviously we use very different lexicons to explain this stuff, so bear with me so I can get you how I see it.
Yeah.
For me, something that you would call, it's a low willpower thing, it's an amateur habit that I'm engaged in, either trying to do more of or quit. And so you're using your MIA. When you want to upgrade now to something that's truly difficult, to me it's still focused around generating joy. It's focused around generating something really positive. But the checking a tweet or whatever, that's momentary happiness. That's not about being something. It's not framework happiness, which is how I think of it. The grander challenges, to achieve true mastery, whether it's to be an amazing guitar player, chess player, bodybuilder, whatever the case may be, there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering. However, I think while they're experiencing momentary pain, it's building a sense of who they are, and that sense of who they are is so powerful and important to them that fighting through it and suffering for that only gives them a stronger sense of self. Right. So in that sense, to me, it seems like you're still chasing a positive feeling.
Right.
Does that ring true with your own understanding?
Well, it's not that you can't enjoy these things, and I don't think it's based on the individual. I think it's based on the action. So I think when we're trying to change our behaviors, there's some behaviors that we want to be experts at. And then there's some behaviors that we're perfectly fine being amateurs at, right? And on the bottom two as well, the habitué or the addict, there's behaviors that we want to stop doing that are low willpower and high willpower. So it's not necessarily the person, it's the behavior they're trying to change. But I think you'll find it very difficult to become an expert at something if you use the same criteria that it takes to become an amateur at something. If your test to become an expert is this Mia, you actually won't have the grit and perseverance needed to power through the times that are shitty, that are hard.
So what does that mindset look like? If you're trying to get out and be more active, is it a Mia?
Right.
What do you shift that question to when it's something you want to be an expert
So
at?
most people's problems, I think, when it comes to the fitness space in particular, is that we train like we're experts, even though what we want is an amateur behavior. Right? We go to the gym and we have the mentality that we need a trainer and fitness programs, and we need to no pain, no gain, and it's got to hurt or it doesn't work. And that's the expert mentality.
But let's take
as
your
opposed
writing.
to the amateur behavior.
And I totally get that. And for somebody who's chasing the wrong thing, you're barking up the wrong tree, right? So that's just forever going to be a problem. But writing, you said, is difficult for you.
Right.
And it's not necessarily something that's like, oh my gosh, the process of deep thinking.
Right.
So you're telling yourself something. You're setting your mind up in some way to let you do that for the long haul, because you've been writing for a very long time.
So when I started writing, just like when I started exercising, it started from an amateur behavior. Mm-hmm. Keep the behavior minimal, make sure it's enjoyable. In fact, I've written on this article you alluded to called "Why Fitness Apps Make You Fat," because what we find is that when you take that mindset in the expert quadrant of I've got to figure out, the expert quadrant is all about figuring out your mistakes, and it's got to be in some way painful in a way, or you're not going to get better. What that means is that people are doing exercise that they hate, which means it's not going to be sustainable. Not only that, we know that when you suffer at something, there's this phenomenon called moral licensing. That when we feel like we've sacrificed in one area of our lives, it's like squeezing on a balloon, right? When we feel like we're being good in one area of our lives, we cheat in other areas of our life, right? I squeeze on this end of the balloon, the other area, and we've seen this phenomenon occur time and time again. We find that when people buy green products, they're actually less kind. They're less likely to help someone who's just fallen down in front of them after they've sacrificed by buying an ecologically sound product. Some of the highest insurance rates on the road today are from a car that you wouldn't expect it. It's not Ferraris and Lamborghinis. Some of the highest insurance rates are for blue Priuses. Right?
Interesting.
Right, because there's this effect of moral licensing. If we're good in one area, we're allowed to be bad in other areas. So how does this play out in the fitness world? Well, I just, sweated it out on the treadmill for 30 minutes, and it was so difficult, and I did it. I persevered, and it was so hard for me. I didn't enjoy a second of it. I deserve a Jamba Juice with 60 grams of sugar and 600 calories. Even though I only burned 300 calories on the treadmill, I deserve a reward. And unfortunately, when bringing you back to the technology industry, a lot of fitness apps today only look at that side of the equation. They're only about getting your step counts because they're using the expert mode as opposed to the amateur mode.
All right, the last thing I think we have to come back to. So it hints at a complexity to the way that you approach all this, which I love. You talked earlier about nuance. So help us understand, you set rules for yourself, right? Pocket being one of them. I don't read articles in a web browser, which I think is very smart. Even I have gotten sucked into the vortex. It is BuzzFeed. How many different areas do you use rules in? What are the rules designed to do, and can other people use them?
Yeah, so we talked about the top of that behavior change matrix, right? These do behaviors that are either low willpower or high willpower. At the bottom of that behavior change matrix are the don't behaviors, the things we want to stop doing. And so there again, we have low willpower and high willpower. So what I've utilized in my life is using a technique I call progressive extremism. Progressive extremism. And the idea is that the problem with diets, and the reason that diets make us fat, is that they train our brains to anticipate scarcity. And of course, what you're doing when you train the brain to do something is that you're heightening the awareness. You're making us, these diets train us to expect, okay, I'm suffering today, but as soon as this diet ends and I can fit into my wedding dress, or the graduation ceremony comes, or here's my goal by the end of the year, I'm going to be at this weight. As soon as I free myself from that diet, and that's the problem. So instead of saying, a diet that has this time-based endpoint, what I advocate for is progressive extremism. So pick something that you want to stop eating, in this case, if food is is the behavior we're trying to change. And the criteria is pick something that you can give up without too much trouble, but you can give it up for the rest of your life. Why would I want to do something temporarily and then go back to eating the way I used to eat? That doesn't make any sense. Of course I'm going to gain the weight. I want to make a permanent change. And so I started out with the first thing that I excised from my life was candy corn. And so I just cut them out and say, I'm never eating candy corn ever again. And then what happened? And I kept track. I kept track of everything I gave up. And then maybe like a week or two later, I'd assess and say, hey, that wasn't so hard. What else could I give up? And then I would give up another thing and another thing. Then I think the thing I gave up was no sugary drinks in the house. Okay, I could have sugary drinks outside the house, no sugary drinks in the house ever again for the rest of my life. It's a rule, progressive extremism. So I went up this chart, kind of more and more and more things that I was giving up, until I gave up, just last June, I gave up refined sugars completely. It's just not something I do. Now, people have no trouble saying, oh, candy corn, easy, that's great. But then you say, okay, I'm going to give up all refined sugars, and people say, oh, that's not so cool anymore. Right. But of course, that's the natural progression. And what you're doing here is you're using this phenomenon of self-image. That when you talked about self-image earlier, and how we can actually utilize how we see ourselves to boost our willpower. There's been a lot of studies that show that when people identify a behavior that they do or don't do as part of who they are, it becomes much easier to resist. For example, if you're a vegetarian, if you're a devout Muslim, if you're an Orthodox Jew, you're not constantly asking yourself, should I eat the meat, or should I have some beer, or should I have some pork, right? Like, that's not a debate you're having on a constant basis. You just don't do that, because that's who you are, right? If I'm a devout Muslim, I just don't drink. That's just what I do. If I'm a vegetarian, I just don't eat meat. It's no longer a debate of should I, can I, is it okay? I just don't, right? Whereas many dieters, they think to themselves, well, should I not? Should I have the cake? And what they're doing is expending this willpower resource that over time, there's a lot of evidence that shows becomes depleted, and it becomes very hard. It's this constant struggle. But by doing this progressive extremism and saying, look, that's just one thing I just don't eat, right, and taking it slowly. I mean, this has to take years to scale up. You're constantly excising things from your life, from your diet, but for the rest of your life. And it's using that same principle of, this is just who I am. I just don't eat those things. So that's the shift, is changing your mindset of this is something I just don't do, right, versus something I can't do, which can't means maybe it's flexible, versus something I just do not do.
Man, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Absolutely
Thank you.
Incredible. Guys, do yourself a favor. Dig into this man's world. I promise you what you've seen here today is but the tip of a very, very large iceberg. I've never seen, and I have read a lot of books on habits, I have never seen anybody that attacks it from so many different points, starting from psychology, really understanding what's going on inside your brain. His talks on the nucleus accumbens, he goes deep. You're going to want to check it out. You're going to want to see how you can put it to good use in your own life. What he ended on there, talking about identity, is so powerful. You guys want to go as deep on that as you can, because if you change your identity, you change your life. And that really, truly is one of the most important things that he offered today, is the ability to take back parts of your life, from the smallest thing at an amateur behavior all the way. If you've got an addiction, there are ways to change it. And coming down to identity, man, that was amazing. So guys, he's even better in person, but trust me, you've got to dig into what he's got out there. You can find him at Nir, Nir, and far.com. Where can they find you on social? On
Twitter, I'm Nir Eyal, Nireyal, and the book is Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products.
Beautiful. You guys won't regret it. Dig in deep. And if you're listening to this on YouTube right now, know that you can also go to the podcast. Be sure to check it out. You guys know that I have an absolute obsession with listening to podcasts as quickly as I can. So you can get it in. You can get it at iTunes. You can drop it into Stitcher. Stitcher will let you go to 3x, so they have my heart. But yeah. There's many ways to interact with us. You can also go to InsideQuest.com. It's a weekly show, guys, so if you haven't already subscribed, be sure to do so right there. We will try to continue bringing amazing people like this man right here who knock it out of the park. All right, guys, until next time, be legendary. Take care.
Thank you.